Good morning. Thank you for joining us. We're going to give it just a minute to let people enter the webinar, get signed in. This is the webinar for Greater Good, Humanities and Academia. We're going to go over some tips and tricks for your application, and just talk about the general application and opportunity for Greater Good with Florida Humanities. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Stephanie Chill. I am the grants coordinator with Florida Humanities. Also on the call this morning, we have Lindsey Morrison, who is our grants director, and she'll be working in the background to help people log in and work with people as chats and questions come through. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get into what's being covered. If you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. There should be a little bubble icon for Q&A where you can enter any questions you have. We will do all questions at the end of the presentation. And we ask that you use that rather than the chat, just so we can track them a little bit better and make sure that we're seeing all the questions that are coming in. We are in webinar format, so you can see us, but we cannot see you. And I think all mics are disabled in this format as well for attendees. So in today's webinar, we're going to cover a little bit about us, Florida Humanities, your grant funding partner, looking at the definition of the humanities from our perspective as the funder, going over Greater Good, Humanities and Academia, what that funding opportunity is and means, and then some keys to successful applications and things you can consider when you're working on your application. And then at the end, we'll go over any questions that have come in. So to give you a little background on us, we are Florida Humanities. If you have worked with us in the past, you may be more familiar with Florida Humanities Council. That's just an update in our branding and name that we've changed. We do just go by Florida Humanities now. We are about 50 years old. We're coming up on our 50th anniversary in about a year. And our organization is similar. There's an organization like us in every state and territory for the US. We are an affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. And so a lot of our funding, especially for competitive grants, is regranting funds that come from the NEH. Now, our mission is specific to Florida. We are looking to preserve, promote, and share the history, literature, culture, and personal stories that offer Floridians a better understanding of themselves, their communities, and their state. And so we're looking for that in applications for all of our grants and through all of our programs as well. So when we look at the humanities, a lot of you are working in the humanities. So we're looking at the disciplines like history, literature, law, political science, philosophy, sociology, art history, and this is just a short list. There are many other disciplines that could be under this, and we are looking at not this just for who is applying, but that this type of discipline, these types of themes and topics are in the programming that you are presenting. Humanities is the process of pursuing an understanding of our shared human experience. So we're trying to help inspire and begin those conversations that help people critically think and creatively think about these themes, these topics, that help people learn to reason and to ask questions about their place and their experience in relation to others around them. So with Florida Humanities funding, and with Greater Good in particular, we're looking at funding public humanities program. So what is that? We're looking at active learning experiences, so things that actively engage rather than just a reading or just putting out publications, something that is creating an opportunity for the public to engage with the humanities. We want experiences that draw upon the methods and insights of the humanities, and that really help people not just foster the understanding, but really talk about and discuss the understanding amongst the group and maybe after the program as well, and help them really thoughtfully reflect on what they've experienced and learned through your program. So some types of public humanities programming that we often see are lecture series or podcasts, outdoor signage, exhibitions, and those types of things. An exhibition by itself or a sign by itself would be passive, but it's looking at creating a hard experience like that, a sign, an exhibition, and then having open houses and discussions and lectures with that to have an engaging component. We also see oral histories, again, with panel discussions or community conversations, building on community conversations and allowing people to discuss directly with experts and scholars, and also looking at reading and film screenings with discussions. So again, being able to show a film and then have an opportunity to have some small group conversations or a panel discussion about what has been seen or is about to be seen in the film, or what was presented in a reading. Types of projects that we cannot support, there's a few different things. So we can't support strictly art or performing arts. So if it's just a theatrical production, that by itself is not fundable. But if you're looking at a panel discussion that goes into the history and the humanities themes presented through a certain production, that could be a fundable opportunity. Social service projects are humanitarian projects. So looking at providing services to people, such as feeding kitchens, or possibly a program that leads people on like a mental health journey. Those are really great programs at their basis and are needed within our community, but they're just ones that we cannot fund unless there is a more open, public, humanities-based engaging component. Looking at creative and scholarly research. So just research by itself, individual projects, a lot of that is pre-work that leads into our programs, but that research up front is not things that we can fund without a public engaging opportunity. And then projects without all the details. And this is a big one. When we have applications come in, our evaluation team needs to know what's being funded. And so we need to have thoroughly thought out plans, things that discuss the format and distribution of your program, as well as the audience that you hope to reach. And we're going to go over some of these details that we're looking for a little bit later on with our application. So let's go into this funding opportunity, Greater Good, Humanities, and Academia. So I'll start by saying this is still a new opportunity. We're at the end of our second year with this grant. And through the past rounds, we've funded about 90% of applications. Now, as this grows, we are seeing more interest. We do expect it to become more competitive, but these are really great applications that are coming through. And so we are excited to talk about all of them and to fund as many as we possibly can. So if you have applied or looked at this opportunity before, you will notice immediately that we have increased the potential award amount. In the past, this has been $3,000 or $5,000, and now we are offering up to $10,000 for public humanities programming. This is specifically for higher education. So we're looking at departments, centers, institutes, or different programs that are affiliated or associated with colleges and universities throughout the state of Florida. So some questions that we get about that, about eligibility, is am I eligible? Is my institution eligible? Public or private higher education institutions are contracting sponsors, but we try to break that down to look at specific departments, such as the Department of History or the Department of Psychology. And those individual groups and programs are who's going to be submitting applications. So your institution, your university could possibly submit 4 or 5 different applications, but your department, the Department of History by itself, can only submit one. There may be an internal process, so you want to check with your fiscal officers to see if there's an internal process to make sure that only one per department or program is being submitted. And that's also part of the conversation. We verify that before applications are submitted as well. And if you have any questions, always reach out to us. So with our applications, we are looking for projects that inspire constructive dialogue. Again, creating engaging opportunities that allow people to speak and interact directly with scholars and community experts on the themes and topics that are being presented through your program. All projects should involve humanities scholars. So while this is open to any department or program at a college or university, your content should be based in the humanities. And so we would expect to see humanities scholars as part of your discussion and possibly part of the planning as well. You can also involve other subject area experts. We certainly think that the more perspectives that can be provided in a program offer a much well-rounded discussion and just a better thought process to help engage people with these topics. Programs should be free and widely available to the public. We still are seeing a good mix of virtual and in person. We see hybrid events. So however your format is structured is okay, but it should be something that's accessible. So something that isn't ticketed, something that doesn't have a expensive fee to attend. We also are looking for projects that attract a diverse audience. We want to know who your project is intended for and that it goes beyond the campus or invites people to your campus that maybe haven't had the opportunity to engage with the institution before. We have found that there's a wonderful array of programs and topics being researched and presented, but people in the general public don't always have access to this great information and work being done. So we're trying to break down those barriers so that we can really engage the community around you with all of the work that is being done. Who qualifies, excuse me, as a humanities scholar? So many of you on this call probably are humanities scholars, or you work and know humanities scholars. So we go through the definition of how the NEH defines this. And we're looking for individuals with advanced degrees, so really masters or PhDs within one of the disciplines of the humanities. And again, we like to see multiple perspectives. So we also like to see subject area experts and community experts. And so you may have a discussion that is looking at racial justice in your area. And so maybe you bring in a history professor who can work as your humanities scholar, but then you also involve local leaders of different nonprofit organizations that work in those areas, or potentially somebody who's leading a nonprofit to help be subject area experts. And again, provide different perspectives on that topic. So I'm going to go over a couple examples to show you some projects that we have funded. If you do go to our website, you can find under our blog posts all of our past awardees. And so those are really good references to see the types of projects that we have funded in the past. So the University of West Florida Historic Trust hosted a program called Admiring the Hush Arbor, and they applied for $2,000. Which wasn't the full amount, and that's fine. We like to see that you're really considering your budget and the needs for your particular program. So they asked for $2,000 in support of bringing in speakers. So their funding went towards honoraria for a local, as well as somebody who traveled about 2 hours to reach them and be part of their program. It also covered marketing, which they did mainly through social media on Facebook and Instagram, and a radio ad as well. And then the award also covered printing cost for the programs that were given out to attendees. And this was a great project that was based at one of the historic sites that is affiliated with the trust and run by a University of West Florida. And they did an outdoor program which goes into the history, contextualizing the hush arbor practices during the colonial times and during post-colonial, looking at enslaved populations and how important this was and how this helped continue and found traditions that are still happening today in different African American communities. It's a really good look at history and following its evolution into how that impacts us today. Another program which we just recently funded through our July round of Greater Good was with Flagler College and their Humanities Department. And they're hosting a 2-day workshop on Panama and its indigenous peoples. And they were awarded $5,000. And the workshop is going to cover the culture, history, and language of the Imbira and Cunatala groups. And these are indigenous groups in Panama. And so for their workshop, their honor area is mainly covering bringing experts from Panama to talk locally in North Florida, as well as their travel. So their flight, their accommodation, and then a daily stipend for food. And so while we're looking at that being what they've been awarded, there was a lot of community support that they showed through their cost share that also engaged the local Panamanian community in North Florida, who will also be presenters on this project. And so they're able to really look historically and culturally at these groups in Panama, but also how people have immigrated to Florida and how that's impacted and changed with that experience of Panamanians who have lived here, and then the next generations who continue those traditions away from the homeland. So for this upcoming opportunity, we're looking at the September 28th deadline. That is at 12 p.m. It's a Wednesday. And this grant period is going to be from October 31st, which is the notification date, through May 31st. Now, the first 2 months, November and December, are a buffer period so that we can get, for any awarded grants, all of the paperwork in order, contract signed, get funding out to our grantees as soon as possible so they can begin working on their programs, getting the logistics in place. Public programs can begin around January 1st. So for this particular grant, if you're looking at when you're hosting your program, it should be between January 1st and May 31st of 2023. And we're just going to go over the life cycle a little bit. So you'll apply on September 28th. And then we have our review period, which goes from the end of September through the end of October. This goes before our evaluation panel. That is a blind panel, and all of our panels are comprised of a staff member from Florida Humanities, a board member, as well as community experts who are familiar with, especially in this case, the university system and experience in the humanities. We're looking at humanities scholars within higher education as being some of our experts, panelists, and evaluators. The notification is on October 31st for approved or denied. Now, after that, for approved grants, there's about 6 months of funding. We do, again, try to get that 90% out as soon as possible. But again, that's why we have that 2-month buffer period, especially with universities and colleges at the end of the year. We know that sometimes offices close or are understaffed because of holidays or breaks. And so we give it a little bit more time to make sure that we can get all of that paperwork signed officially and through the system. During the 6 months that your grant is open, we also require event listing forms, and that's something that we will talk further with project directors directly about. But it's just letting us know all the details of your program so that we can help promote and share that information. For grantees, there's also a final report that is due, and that is due 60 days after closing or 60 days after your last grant-funded event. After the final report is submitted and approved by Florida Humanities, we will remit the last 10% of your award as a reimbursement. So we do expect you to use that full award during your grant period, with that 10% being a reimbursement. Now, if you are denied, we don't want you to lose hope. There's a lot of great things that you should look at. The first thing to do is to reach out to me and ask for comments from the evaluation team, and we can send you direct comments so you can see what the evaluators were thinking. We do want you to revise and reapply. A lot of times when grants are denied, it's because maybe all the details weren't presented or it wasn't clear. And so we want you to review those comments, to revise your application and apply again in the future. So your steps to applying for a Greater Good Humanities and Academia grant is to first brainstorm your project. We really want you to have a founded idea. So something where you've already really thought about the details, the people involved, the goals of your project. And after you have that foundation, you're going to reach out to me. As the grants coordinator on this grant, I'm going to talk with you about that project, We're going to make sure it's eligible, that there aren't any major issues that would be a barrier for you applying, or that would be an automatic, we can't fund this particular activity. After we have our discussion, I will provide an access code so you can begin working on the application if your project is eligible. So you apply online through our portal. We do not do physical applications. It is fully online. And as you work on your application, we are always here to help. So you can always ask questions, ask for a review, and we are happy to give feedback. And again, if you are denied, that last step is to see comments. Ask for an insight onto what the evaluators said so that you can take steps to revise and apply again in the future. So let's look at our actual application and some different keys to crafting great narratives and a budget. Now, the first thing you're going to do once you get that access code is consider who is also working on this application. If you are working on this by yourself, that is fine. You can enter everything and submit it. But we have found often that people in higher education, faculty members, are working with a fiscal officer, possibly a grants officer, or somebody in your office of sponsored research. And so if you need somebody who's looking over budgetary forms or helping with narratives, maybe you have a co-collaborator on your project, another faculty member, you can use this collaborate button to add them by email. And so that way you can add them, they can just view, you could have somebody edit or give them permissions to submit, and they will be able to, if you clicked edit or submit, they'll be able to help enter any information if you're sharing the workload of the narratives or the budget form, and help so that you're all working towards completing that full application. So the different narratives that you'll be working on for this particular application are the organizational mission, presenting the humanities content in your program format, listing personnel that are involved with the project, looking at your audience and telling us who that is, as well as if you're reaching out to underserved communities, presenting your marketing and promotion plan, and any community partners who are working with you on this project, either as speakers or promotional partners, as well as if there are any fees or potential barriers for people accessing your program. So when we look at narratives, we'll start with humanities content here. We are looking for well-organized, very clear and concise descriptions of what the project is, why it's important to have this project, and how it's going to be formatted. So in this example, we have a good example of, we have workshops featuring the work of Toni Morrison. We specifically see that it's going to be 2 events in person, as well as a 3rd event that will be virtual. And then the specific events are listed out, showing us specific details as to what type of a program they're going to be. We have a film screening, we have story time, so a reading and discussion, and who will be working on those programs and the themes that they are presenting. All of our sections do have a word count, so you want to keep that in mind. And you just want to be detailed and concise, but be able to present, the very specifics of your project and what you are aiming to do. The personnel section is where you're going to list who's involved. And this does not have to be long biographical paragraphs that will take up a lot of room. There is a section for you to upload more of that information. But in the narrative section of your application, you're just going to list the person, their role as the project. Are they the program director? Are they a community leader that's giving their insight? Are they one of your humanities scholars who are advising and working on the project? And you're just going to list their qualifications with that. So what institution are they affiliated, or what organization are they affiliated with? And what are some of their duties on the project and their qualifications for that? As I mentioned, there is a section for you to upload more information. We ask that we have at least a maximum of a 2-page resume, so a condensed form that just shows us the qualifications and the recent activity of your personnel who are involved, to show us that they're qualified as for that role in your project. And that's uploaded as a PDF separately. We also, I'm sorry, this is a little blurry, but we also look at the target audience and underserved communities. And so we want to see who you're reaching out to. This narrative is really great. It tells us that the project is open to everybody, but then it says in particular who they're going to be marketing to. And they're designing marketing specifically to reach out to the Latinx origin people within Northeast Florida. And it gives us a little bit of data of how the population has grown, as well as why it's cost prohibitive for people to access this type of programming. And so it's showing that we have a great audience. They know who they're targeting, as well as why they need to target that audience. Looking in our marketing and promotion plan, we're looking for specific. So not just that you're marketing on social media, but that you're going to use specific platforms, Facebook, Twitter. If you list public radio or newspapers, we'd like to see what types of local outlets you are working with for promotion. And this is going to be, your main project, your main marketing promotion plan. We also immediately following have a section on community partners. So you may have a lot of community partners either offering to host your event, help promote your event, and similar to personnel, you're going to list who the community partners are and what their role in your project is. So this community center is going to assist with digital promotion. We also have the grocery store who's going to provide refreshments for the in-person events. So giving us a little bit more detail. And with community partners, similar to the personnel section, there will be an opportunity for you to upload letters of commitment where they can show that they are committed to supporting the project and how they will do that in their own words. So we've looked at successful. Well, let's look at what is not successful. And so as I mentioned earlier, one of our things is that we're looking for a lot of detail. So if you have a very brief description on your content, we're going to have workshops. We're also going to have a virtual panel. That doesn't tell us what it's about. It doesn't tell us, how it's going to be facilitated, who's involved. And so, something very brief without all those details is not going to be fundable. We don't have a good idea of what your project is. Promotion plan, promoting through social media and printed flyers and newspapers. Again, that doesn't give us a good idea that you've really thoroughly thought about your promotion plan, that you've considered what the actual costs are going to be. We're going to be looking for those details because they also confirm that you've created a realistic budget when we get to that part, and that you've really truly considered what it takes to put on your project, your program for the community. Community partners, they're going to be the local libraries, all of them, some of them. We want to know who, and we want to reach out for businesses. So it's okay if you don't have everybody of your business contacted, but we want to see that you've begun those conversations. Ideally, you will have commitments when you are applying. But just a plan that says we're going to reach out to these people is not going to be quite sufficient enough. So when we look at our budgeting form, we tried to condense this so it fits into certain areas. We have different areas for you to look at honoraria. So any speaker fees, travel, which can cover flight mileage, can cover accommodations, daily stipends for food for your guest speakers, facilities, equipment rental, or tech support. So especially if you're looking at doing a hybrid or a virtual event, are you recording this? Do you need transcription services to have live captions? Are you renting a room to host your event in? Marketing and outreach. We are happy to cover marketing costs. So if you're going to put $600 towards a Facebook campaign, and you can tell us who you're marketing, what specific groups you're going to try to target through that, that is definitely allowable. And any other outreach costs, if you're printing flyers, if you are working with newspapers or radios, those are definitely areas you can look at. Indirect costs. So we're going to go into that in a minute, but indirect costs is something that we are looking at more closely. It is an area that universities and colleges can ask for a certain percentage to go towards those basic costs like utilities, facilities, administration that help keep everything running at the university. We'll go over that in a little bit more detail in the next slide. And then our last is other. So for anything that isn't captured Maybe you're working on an exhibition. If you have exhibition costs, that could go under other. If you have student workers who are helping with the logistics on this project, that can go under other as well. So what is a federally negotiated indirect cost rate agreement? There is a small section on this in the guidelines, and we're talking more about this mainly because we have increased that award amount. So this is going to be looking at your indirect costs. Most universities and colleges have a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement with the federal government. Now, for any federal funds, that allows universities and colleges to take a certain percentage, whatever the percentage is of the agreement, from the award amount towards those indirect costs. So you will need to check with your fiscal officer, so the grants officer that you've worked to see what that percentage is. This will be impacted by the nature of your project as well as the location, if it's on campus or off campus. Some universities may have a waiver program that allows you to waive the percentage or reduce it. And that's, again, you have to check internally because every university and college has a slightly different system. But when we see that we're offering $10,000 in the award amount, we are seeing this being requested more often. And so that's something you need to consider when you're looking at your budget. Now, if the university does waive or reduce that percentage, you can show that in cost share. We do expect to see a line item for indirect costs somewhere in your budget, and you'll just have to work out with your grants officer if that is going to be requested as part of requested funds or if that will be cost share or somehow divided. So looking at our budget form, this is available in the application. We do require that you use the forms that we've provided. This just helps streamline and keep everything in the same format for our evaluation team as they go through all the applications. So this is just a brief example budget. So as you look through this, you see that there are, whole rounded numbers, that it's been broken down to reach up to exactly 10,000, including the indirect cost. And that in cost share, we see this as well. There is a required one-to-one cost share. So if you request 10,000 in funds for your project, you also need to show 10,000 in cost share. And we'll cover cost share just a few slides. So the back side of the budget form, the front side is going to look at just specifically those line items and the amounts. The detail section on your budget form is going to ask you to provide some more details. Now, this should be, mirroring what you've already presented in the narrative sections, but breaking it down just to very specific events. So you have 3 speakers. Who are your speakers and how much is each person getting? And if you look here, we have a section for requested funds and then a section also for cost share. So Dr. Smith is getting 1,000, Dr. Gomez is getting 1,000 in speaker fees. And then we have a partial speaker fee for Director Fontella, 500. And then if I look down here, we also have the other part. We have a partial speaker fee, 500, that's going to be paid by the university. So you can split up costs that way as well. You're just showing us kind of where that funding is coming from. We also have Dr. Baskins, who has donated their fee. And so that's an in-kind cost share. So we are looking within this detail section for just very concise, very specific, short descriptions of what you're requesting, specifically what that is going towards, and then how you will be showing cost share as well in the amounts that are listed in your chart. Now, an unsuccessful budget is going to have very little details, just like with the narrative sections. It's not spelled out. 3 speakers, we're not sure who, we're not sure how this 900 is divided. 300 for lodging, is that per person? Is it for one person? And then when you look at the budget, this doesn't add up to 5,000. And so we're looking to make sure that these forms are filled out correctly, because that also gives us reassurance that you've gone through these forms thoroughly and that you're presenting the information as it matches your needs with the narratives that you have presented earlier in the application. So what is cost share? Cost share is the match. The NEH requires us to have cost share. We like to see all possible cost share. The minimum is an equal cost share, but we know that these projects can take a lot to put on. And partially, when we ask for you to present all possible cost share, it's for reporting purposes so that we can show the NEH that Florida is supporting these projects through their community work as well. But also it helps us project for the future so that we know that projects are costing more and more. So when we look at cost share, you're looking at in-kind or donated services or cash cost share, things that have been paid by us, either your university or one of your partners. So in-kind could be somebody waiving their fee, such as their speaker fee, or the university offering to host the program in one of their lecture halls and waiving the room rental fee. That would all be in-kind. Cash cost share would be if somebody is maybe you have a partner, a community partner who's going to pay for refreshments. They're paying for that cost. So that's going to be under cost share, but you're going to identify it as cash cost share. As you work on this, if you have any questions about your budget or how you can get to that cost share amount, definitely reach out and talk to us. We're happy to talk through these ideas with you as well. So now that we've gone through our application, we've gone through our budget and the basic content of what this funding opportunity is for, hopefully you feel ready to apply for funding. So what are your steps now? As we mentioned earlier, you do need the access code. So that first step is to reach out to me. But when you have that, you're going to go to our online application portal and you will sign in. If you do not have an account, it's going to ask you to create a new account and you'll be prompted to enter your information as well as your sponsoring organization's information. Once you have all that filled in, you're going to hit apply, one of the top tabs up here. When you apply, when you hit apply, you will see some other opportunities that we have, but you're not going to see Greater Good immediately. You need to enter the code here in the access code bar. And after you do that, it will pop up as the first one and you can hit apply on the right side to access the application. Now, if you didn't want to open it right away, you can download a preview. This will download all the questions. This is also available on the Greater Good web page if you wanted to download it without getting into the portal system as well, so that you can preview those questions and work on them before entering them in the application. So if you have any questions or if you need to have a discussion with me to get that access code, I invite you to reach out to me at schill@flahum.org. And we are here to help and get you through this process and make it as smooth as possible. Again, here's my contact information or Lindsey's as well if for some reason you cannot reach me. And I am going to give it a second. Lindsey's here. All right. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my screen so we can go to Q&A. Or do you want me to leave it up in case we have specific slides?
Yeah, go ahead and leave it up so people can record I think your email just in case. But yeah, so we have a good question in here from Mark. So can staff salaries be used for cost share?
So generally, yes. We can definitely, you're looking at direct programmatic hours. So if your time spent on the project is part of your duties, or you're even donating your time, if you're donating your time, it would be in kind. If it is part of your salary duties, your salary would be showed under cost share because your university would be paying for that. You do want to check internally though with your grants officer. Some universities have certain stipulations as to how they want to record that. And so you're going to want to verify that to make sure it's just being recorded properly to show us, but also internally so that they can confirm that whenever those forms come through and towards the end when we're trying to verify what your final project was as well.
Absolutely. Stephanie and I have noticed that sometimes there's things that we allow on our end, but your university doesn't allow on your end. So there has to be a good synergy and a marriage between what we both allow. So making sure you are working with your appropriate fiscal sponsored research office is key to grants on our end.
Absolutely. We have had questions about including project directors or faculty at a sponsoring organization, and if that's allowable under requested funds. And the answer is potentially. This is an area that we're looking at closely because the main thing is that we cannot double fund somebody. So if you are a project director working on the project, if you have a colleague at the same university who is speaking on a panel, if that goes above and beyond what your salaried responsibilities are, and if your university or college allows it, then you could possibly be eligible for a certain stipend under the allowed fundable expenses. But again, in your application, you'll need to confirm that it is not part of your salary, that this is work being done in addition to what is expected of you from the university and what your salary covers.
Good answer, yeah. And Hugo has a good question, but I wanted to clarify one thing, jumping on cost share, is that Florida Humanities is a nonprofit organization, but these funds come from the federal government. So while we're a nonprofit, these are federal dollars. So for cost share, we can't match federal dollars with federal dollars as well. So your Office of Sponsored Research will have that information, but just hold that in your pocket for knowledge on your end as well.
Absolutely.
So Hugo's good question is, can the funded programs be in languages other than English?
That is a great question. And the answer is yes. The application has to be in English just because our evaluation team and our staff are all English speaking. We do have a staff member on site who can help us kind of look over event listing forms later if they are in other languages. But we have funded bilingual programs or programs that are, there was one recently that was fully in Spanish, and they provided English subtitles on the recorded version of their program. So they did have ways to make it accessible to multiple languages. But I think that we fully encourage that for you to have the program in a way that it is most accessible for your targeted audience. So if your targeted audience doesn't primarily speak English, definitely finding ways to make that more accessible through their own language is certainly, I think, a wonderful idea and something we like to see.
Absolutely. And a good question here on marketing and letters of support. So the question is, do you need a letter of support from a department's marketing department stating that there's specific marketing services that they would provide for the project, or just a brief statement about the services within the application? So
So that's a good question. I don't think we need it if we're looking at the same university. If you have a community partner who is going to print flyers for you and they're not part of your organization, we would want to see that described in their letter of commitment. But if it's your own marketing office, we do want you to check with them to get an estimate for what your budget should be for that particular area, but we don't need a letter confirming from them that they're participating.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll take this question because it's about the difference between greater good humanities and academia funding opportunity and then community project grants to help you guys decide which the best opportunity is to apply for. So both offer up to $10,000, both support public humanities programming. So they seem very, very similar. The difference is that greater good humanities and academia is just for higher education. It is just for colleges and universities to support public humanity programming that reaches both within and beyond the campus community. Community project grants is open to all nonprofit organizations, public institutions, cities, municipalities across the state of Florida. So while it supports similar programming, the chances of funding if you apply for a community project grant is a lot less. I think the last funding round was about 25% of applications received were funded because there's so much competition. And the reason we created Greater Good is to create a unique funding opportunity just for colleges and universities, because there's so much great programming happening within your spaces. We wanted to create a funding stream just for you all. So while both are open to you, highly encourage you to apply for Greater Good. You will have a better chance to fulfill your dreams of funding.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, like we did say earlier, that this is becoming more competitive, but we're still seeing significantly less applications come through this round than through community project grants. So it's still a better chance. We do like to say, you're not competing with the other applicants, you're really competing against yourself. So it's really about crafting that really strong narrative, concise details, presenting everything clearly and accurately. But the reality is that, we do get a certain number of applications, and so that will impact the final decision at the end.
Absolutely. So can educational websites be funded?
So yes, they can. We have funded web projects in the past, but we still need to see an active, engaging component. And so if you do have a website that you're working on or that you want to craft, we would need to see some type of programming along with that. So a panel discussion or a kickoff event that invites the same scholars or similar scholars to who would be helping you with that to talk about the themes that will be presented through the website, as well as, the background of why it's important to have that as part of a resource that you are creating.
Yeah. Another good question is, if we want to apply for this cycle, so apply for the September 28th deadline, but run out of time, when would be the next cycle for applying for the Greater Good Grant?
So we aim to offer this 2 times a year. And the way that they are structured is to line up with the fall and the spring terms that are typically held at universities and colleges. So our next deadline will be in spring of 2023. We do not have the date set in stone quite yet, but you could expect it to be probably around April or May, potentially a little bit earlier, but mid to late spring. And that would be a notification in the summer with programming in fall of 2023. Now, if you are looking, long term, the next deadline would be around the same time, beginning of fall, which would be intended for spring of 2024.
Right. And we do have a programmatic e-news that we send out. So if you are not signed up for our e-news, Stephanie will send out a link following this webinar so you can sign up to hear when all the deadlines are going to be announced.
Yeah. And I would, even if you are just considering applying in the future, reach out to me now because we can have that conversation. It could really help set you up to consider what you need to get done within the next year or so to apply, and different barriers you may need to start working to kind of break down to get to your programming. But also I can put you on a direct email list I have so that when the next deadline is announced, I can reach out directly to you and say, hey, are you still interested? We've announced our deadline. I'd love to see where your project is right now and have another conversation.
Right. So some really good questions are coming in. I appreciate them. So this question is, the guidelines list the requirements needed for the letter of support from a community partner, but we're looking specifically for guidance on letters of commitment from project personnel. Would you want to see a commitment from them regarding any funding cost share that they are providing, or just support from what they are providing? Would the project director or co-PDs need to provide letters, or just outside speakers?
I think we're looking at just outside speakers, but Lindsey, you could confirm. I think most of the time, if it is, if it's a speaker who is also at your university, we'd want them to commit as well. But if it's a co-collaborator, you could just list them. When we look at letters of support from speakers or from personnel, it doesn't have to be how much they are, waiving their fee or how much they are financially committing. It's them committing to the project overall. So it doesn't have to be a formal contract or a formal letter even. It could be an email showing that you've had that conversation and that, they say, this is a great project and yes, I'm interested in participating. And we can talk further about the details when it comes to fruition.
Yes. And I would say too, our evaluators, when thinking about letters of commitment or support, it's a more the merrier mentality. The more letters of support that you can gather in advance, the better it just shows that there's a whole lot of community support. What we need to see is what Stephanie said, is that the speakers that you've said are speaking have said that they agreed that they are speaking. What we don't want is that you say you're going to bring in this speaker from Texas, but they don't actually know anything about your program, or that they, that you're thinking about including them, which we have seen a few times. So it just provides a little safety net for you all and for us as the funders.
And I would say I've had conversations around this topic before, because sometimes you're reaching out to, a national author, and that can be intimidating, and you don't want to have them on board and then not get the funding. But we want you to have that conversation. And the reason is they may not be available. And so when you look at really big name speakers, presenters, they get these requests often. So it's not going to be random. It's not going to offend them for you to reach out and say, hey, we are presenting this project. This is something we'd like to do. We're applying for funding. are you available for this date? Are you available for this month? You may not have the exact date yet, but you could say we're aiming to host this program in, April. Would you be available to fly in and be a part of our panel? And they'll say yes or no. And if they don't get back to you, then that's another sign you might need to have a backup sooner than later. And we do, if you don't hear from them, we do want you to have that conversation with a backup if you're not getting any response from your initial contact that you're trying to reach out to. But begin those conversations as soon as you can, especially at the larger level. They're going to get booked up pretty far in advance.
Absolutely. So Stephanie, I was hoping you could expand a little bit on one item, but first I just wanted to pause a brief mention that we will be providing the PowerPoint and the recording of this session out to all who registered, as well as you all who are attending. So you'll have that for your records to go back and watch later on. But Stephanie, maybe you can expand upon some successful ways you've seen colleges, university departments reach out beyond the campus community to involve them in programming. That's one thing that we really focus on with this grant, reaching both within and beyond the campus community. So do you have any best practices of what you've seen applicants do?
Yeah, I don't know if it's best practices, but it's building relationships. And so that's what you're trying to do, is build relationships to get more support for your program, to offer more perspectives. Reaching out to, it could be libraries contacting a programmer there to see if they can help host or promote. And a lot of times I've seen project directors reach out to, specific nonprofits or organizations that are related to the topics they're presented. One of those that we talked about earlier was the Flagler College's project for Panama and its indigenous people. And so on its surface, it's kind of like, why are we having a program about Panama and Florida? We are Florida Humanities. We want to look at Florida-based projects. And so it was really important for them to reach out to some of the local communities, and they have that tie-in. So it's looking at the indigenous cultures and traditions, but it's tying into what Floridians' experiences is what the experiences are that they have after they've immigrated to Florida, after they have, Panamanian heritage, after they have multiple generations, and how they're able to have that side-by-side kind of look at the basis of culture and how that's evolved over time far away. And so just similar to, I think, reaching out to, individual speakers, people are happy to be involved. The worst they can do is say, hey, we're too busy, it's not possible. But they're not going to be offended to say, we have this theme, we think you'd be a great collaborator on it. Are you interested in participating? And you don't even have to, if you don't have a specific thing, maybe you just want them as a partner because it helps, show the community in your marketing that you have more support. Sometimes having a partner's name as part of your project can go really far to validating and creating a lot of excitement for your project. And so maybe you just start the conversation with, we are thinking about this project. Do you like it? Are you interested in being a part of it? And a lot of times people will say yes.
Yep, absolutely. And also thinking about where you're hosting your programming, having them as a mixture of off-site, off-campus, maybe in a library, as you mentioned, Stephanie, or at a community center, at a church, somewhere where you're meeting the community where they are. Because one thing I heard a couple of years ago that really stuck to me is some people don't feel comfortable or that they have a place walking on a university campus to attend programming. So mixing up your programming locations is another good way to involve the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And think about your target audience. Where are they? And is it easier to go to them? And some communities, it is important to go to those communities. That's how you build a relationship, is by providing something for them in their community, not asking them to come onto your campus or to come to an unfamiliar location. And so applying through this with a project that, really intends to go out there to reach the community, that could be your first step into building a very fruitful, long-standing relationship with these communities in the future. I've seen not just libraries, but sometimes schools work with churches or with high schools locally. And that's not that they're promoting a certain they're not talking about whatever is presented at that high school or at that church. They're using it as a location because it's something that's familiar with the community. And so a facility is a facility wherever it needs to be.
Absolutely. Well, Stephanie, that was the end of the questions. Some really good for this round. So thank you all so much for joining. Stephanie, you want to close us out?
Yeah. And again, if you have any other questions that come up, please email me or Lindsey, and we are happy to answer any questions you have and get the ball rolling on your project. So thank you for joining us today.
I'm sorry, one more question that came in.
Absolutely. More questions.
We want to answer all of them. Do you allow hyperlinks within the application boxes? The answer, is they technically could be put in there, but it's better if they are included as supplemental documents if you have hyperlinks all in one place.
You could do a Word document. Even if you have like a multi-day project, you could show like a schedule and then a hyperlink if you have a website working towards that as an uploaded Word doc or PDF, which then our evaluation team can click through the portal.
Yes, oftentimes evaluators print out applications, so if it's hyperlinked within the narrative, they may not see it. And we do like all information to be narratively written within the narrative. That does help a lot.
Good question.
All right.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Chat with you soon.
Bye.